Good evening, you watching India First. I'm Gaurav. There's breaking news that's coming in from the northeastern state of Arunachal Pradesh, where Indian and Chinese troops have clashed, and these clashes have taken place at an altitude of close to 17,000 feet. Of course, these clashes had taken place on the 9th of December, but information confirmed by the Ministry of Defence just a short while back, Chinese troops tried to violate the line of actual control. Of course, there is a difference in perception of the line of control, line of actual control in this sector. And when the Chinese troops tried to come forward beyond the point, what is India's red line, Indian soldiers pushed them back, and there were fierce clashes that took place on the 9th of December. After these clashes, there are reports that several Chinese soldiers were injured, as were some Indian soldiers. The reports are at least 6 to 8 Indian soldiers were injured in these clashes, close to 20 Chinese soldiers, and this is source-based information. As of now, at least 20 Chinese soldiers were injured in clashes that took place along the line of actual control. We have more details that are gradually filtering in. The reports seem to indicate that several Chinese soldiers and Indian soldiers had limb injuries, broken bones in the 6 to 8 Indian soldiers were injured. Some have now been airlifted to Guwahati. Following these clashes, there was a flag meeting. The Indian commander on ground sought a flag meeting, and efforts are to bring tempers and tension down. Of course, tension remains extremely high along the line of actual control. I quickly want to bring in India Today's Shiv Arur and Abhishek Bhalla for more on this big story. Shiv, you've been able to speak to your sources. What's the latest that we're picking up at 10 tonight?
The situation currently in Yangtze of Tawang Sector is said to be pretty calm. In the context of what happened on Friday, it's been a few days since that clash took place. There was an immediate disengagement after about 15 to 20 minutes of hand-to-hand fighting between the two sides. It was a larger Chinese patrol party that was approaching the Indian post, and suddenly, in an unprovoked manner, stones flew from one side onto the Indian side, and this triggered a very, very harsh response from the Indian side, and they literally pounced on the Chinese soldiers. There was a lot of a lot of pushing, pulling, fists flying, stones flying, and there were injuries sustained by troops on both sides. According to one estimate, two sources that I spoke to in Tawang Sector say 9 Indian soldiers sustained some injuries, about 22 Chinese soldiers sustained injuries, but it was a very brief clash between both sides. The disengagement was quite swift, and as you said, the local commanders held a flag meeting the same day, just a few hours later, to maintain peace. The only problem is the post where this particular clash happened is only one of many posts on the Chinese side, where the number of troops have actually been increased in a marked manner over the last few weeks and months, which is actually the reason why tensions and temperatures have been especially high in this sector of Arunachal Pradesh. So there remains uncertainty over whether things remain vulnerable and volatile, and there could be more clashes as well.
And that's the apprehension. There could be more clashes given the troops that have been amassed. Now, Chinese, and I want to bring in Abhishek Bhalla for more on this. Abhishek, the Chinese have secretly, surreptitiously been increasing their numbers, and that seems to indicate that there is a bigger game plan that the Chinese have in mind. And of course, India keeping a hawk eye on the situation. We match them, or do we outnumber them now?
Gaurav, certainly a larger design, and in fact, I can confirm this now. It's just common, the information just coming into me that there was a build-up of about 2 weeks. For the last 15 to 16 days, there were constant face-offs. Chinese were being intercepted by the Indian side, and there was a dialogue going on at the local military commander level. And the Indian side was hopeful that there will be a final resolution and the matter will be sorted out locally. Things will not get escalated. But because the Chinese had enhanced their numbers as far as the forward deployment is concerned, there obviously is a battalion from both sides in these forward locations, but there were about 300 soldiers that were dispersed off and sent off in various patrols constantly on the Indian side. And that's when things got out of hand, but things still remain volatile, even though there was a disengagement, as we have been told. But obviously after an incident like this, and especially in a place like Yangtze, which is considered quite sensitive, it's one of the flashpoints. Yes, and it is one of the flashpoints for several years. So obviously things are not being taken lightly while things are calm. But there is still some tension on the ground.
Stay with me for a moment, Abhishek and Shiv. I quickly now want to cut across because we're getting a lot of reactions from military analysts and experts. Remember, 2006 onwards, Yangtze, close to 17,000 feet altitude. There are some posts around 16,000, 16,500, 17,000 feet altitude. The clashes are taking place in Tawang in Arunachal Pradesh. Let's quickly listen into some of the reactions that are coming in. I'll get you much more. The timing is very crucial, the build-up is very crucial, and the bigger design. Remember, now the action seems to be shifting from Ladakh to eastern sector Arunachal Pradesh. Much more on that, but listen into reactions coming in.
China has always had the intention of occupying Arunachal, and India has categorically told them that Arunachal continues to be an inalienable part of India, and not even a single inch of its territory will be compromised.
The line actually which divides India and China is what we consider the line of actual control, and China considers something else. So there is always a skirmish between India and China. There is tension at the borders, and this tension has to be resolved, otherwise China will have to face the consequences.
ये जो एक एक्शन हुआ है चाइनीज पीएलए की तरफ से, ये कुछ एक और बड़ी लंबी चीज दर्शाता है कि वो जो पूरी भारत के साथ जो एलएसी के ऊपर जो उनका डिप्लॉयमेंट है या जो उनका टैक्टिकल प्लान है या ओवरऑल प्लान है, वो बहुत घातक है. वो चाहते हैं कि पूरा का पूरा जो अरुणाचल है वो चाइना के साथ जोड़ दिया जाए.
Chinese are maintaining their same stance. They are aggressive. We have now got alerted. There is no doubt about it. We are alert. Our reaction was quick. Probably a reaction was least expected by Chinese, or even if Chinese expected it, they underestimated us. Whatever the case may be. But I still repeat that now we must not depend on perception. We must now make a stop to it and say that this is our permanent location.
So let me now try and explain the lay of this land to you. This is an area where the Chinese have actually tried even in the past to dominate this. Now let me explain this to you on the map. Let's move forward on this map as I try and explain the terrain to you. Let's move to Arunachal Pradesh. This is the land of the rising sun, and this is Tawang. This is where the flashpoint, the recent flashpoint, is about 35 kilometers from this point. This is where the clash has taken place on the 9th. Let's move on to the next slide as I try and explain the lay of the land to you. Now you look at this. Now in summers, of course, this is quite green, but otherwise these are mountains. These are high mountains in this area. The clash, we are told, has taken place at somewhere in this area. These are some of the peaks. Now this is the line of actual control. As you can see, this is an area which is Indian territory, but there is a perception difference in this area. The Chinese also try and come up to their claim line. India goes up to what we perceive as our territory. And while India and China, there have been perception differences along the line of actual control. Both sides go up to their claim lines. But then there is a red line, and India stops China from crossing that red line. And I once again want to bring in Shiv Arur for more on this. Shiv, if we were to talk about the difference in perception, there may be a perception difference, but this time, especially after Galwan, India does not trust China at all. No question of letting China come to occupy the heights or come anywhere close to the heights.
There's no question of trusting China with even the least bit of movements. And like I said, the fact that China has inexplicably been boosting its troop numbers at many of these posts has eroded trust even further in the Yangtze sector, which is a place which, as we've been discussing, is a place where, tensions have been traditionally high, especially in the last few months. There's absolutely no question. The trust has been at rock bottom since, May 2020. There have been disengagements in eastern Ladakh, but the very fact that there have been a handful of brawls across sectors since May 2020, this one was a fairly serious one, but there have been some minor brawls. There have been some instances of Chinese soldiers being kept back on the Indian side, after they tried to infiltrate in October 2021. So the trust deficit between both sides is at an all-time low. But given the fact that the larger picture hasn't changed, that China's mass deployments, on the Tibetan side have remained extremely high, coupled with infrastructural developments on their side and our side, India's trust factor is also, lack of trust rather, is coupled with a very, very aggressive no-nonsense posture. They don't take any nonsense. The threshold for reaction from the Indian side is much lower now because they are well aware of the kind of treachery that China is capable of and has been demonstrated ever since Galwan.
And read between the lines, as Shivarur very rightly pointed out, there have been times when India has kept back Chinese soldiers who tried to violate the line of actual control, of course returning them after conversations. And as Abhishek will tell us, there have been multiple face-offs even after Galwan. Not clashes, but face-offs at the borders. I have two experts who join me on the broadcast. Shiv and Abhishek, stay with me. Here are officers who've been posted on ground. They know the lay of the land. They join us on the broadcast. Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain joins us on the show, as does Colonel Dini. Both have dealt with Chinese soldiers at the LAC, whether in Ladakh or in Arunachal Pradesh. General Hasnain, Chinese action looks very well planned. What do you make of the timing of the Chinese actions and the action itself?
See, Gaurav, first of all, thank you for having me on your show. I think it's a very important juncture that we are at today, the onset of winter 22-23. For a long time, we've had no real action on the line of actual control. And it's a known Chinese PLA strategy that focus on the conventional operations, focus on the land borders of the Himalayan front is a necessity from time to time to keep India committed, its forces committed to the land borders, while the actual attention should really be in the maritime zone, where the Chinese are much more vulnerable. They perceive themselves to be much more vulnerable. Therefore, this is a long old ploy of theirs to keep the pot boiling, different sectors, different times, get the LAC active. This is an operation, virtually an operational necessity for them. But more important than that, at this juncture, there's a requirement of a psychological aspect to it. They want to send home a message. They've earlier in Ladakh, they have not been able to achieve their aim at all. Now they want to open up a different front to try and bring about what I've always been talking about, moral domination on the line of actual control. Something which Pakistan has been doing attempting to do on the LOC, in which we have bettered them over the years many times. The attempt here to try and create pinpricks, to try and force the Indian army down to look down and give home a message that the PLA has soldiers who are 10 feet tall, who are far better trained and equipped than the Indian army. Now, this is
more
the
than
psychological
20 Chinese soldiers were injured, General, and I want to bring in Colonel Dini on this. I believe the information is more than 20 Chinese soldiers were injured. Several have gone back with broken bones. That moral ascendancy that they sought at the LAC in Arunachal Pradesh, have they been able to achieve it, or is this another rude awakening for China?
It's an absolute rude awakening yet again for China, Gaurav, and I think General Hasnain has, he's brought out it very well, that this kind of attempt of each time trying to show who's the boss on the line of actual control, and this has been happening for a very long time, and I really don't understand that Chinese still have not learned their lessons either, whether it is in Pangong So 2017 or in Galwan 2020, and now here in Tawang 2022. Each time they have gone back with a bloody nose, and we only talk about events when the Chinese come inside, but there are multiple events. I can very say that Indians also go across, where we go up to our line of where we perceive our line of actual control is. So it is not a one-sided story wherein it's always been shown that the Chinese come in and now they're trying to stake up. We also go in and we go up to our claim line. So it's a very clear plan. The kind of number of soldiers which were there at the Chinese side. It's not a one-off kind of thing. It's yet again an attempt to show that they are something much more superior, which they are not. And I think each time the Indian Army soldiers have shown what it means to be a real soldier in the line of actual control.
And yet they continue to try, Abhishek. Apparently, there have been other instances, maybe not a clash like this one, but there have been face-off and multiple face-offs even after Galwan, and there is tension building up over infrastructure build-up even in Sikkim. So whether it's Arunachal Pradesh or Sikkim, after Ladakh, China seems to be shifting focus here.
Most definitely, Gaurav. It's certainly not just Ladakh. There has been a lot of activity in Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim in the eastern sector. And even the central sector that consists of Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh, while things have been calm, there have been no face-offs, but there is heavy infrastructure development on both the sides, heavy deployment on both the sides. And coming back, Gaurav, to this particular flashpoint in Yangtze, I traveled to Arunachal Pradesh last year. In the Tawang sector to various forward locations. And there was a huge thrust by the Indian Army, especially on surveillance, because there was information coming in, human intelligence coming in, that there is a lot of infrastructure building, more specifically the villages, the integrated model villages that the Chinese have planned. Yes. Over 600 of these have been planned, and in fact, even across Yangtze, several of these exist. Now, these are nothing but, military locations. They have a dual purpose in guise of getting in civilians. There is military personnel who are coming in there to have enhanced deployment.
Does this indicate, General Hasnain, that a war with China, whether now or in some years, is inevitable?
Gaurav, that's $1 million question, no doubt. But I am one of those from that school of thought which believes that the Chinese perceive that there is no guarantee that they could win an all-out conventional war against India up in the high Himalayas. Therefore, I think over the next few years, you will find many such patrol clashes, many such standoffs, many such deployments, many such exchanges. If fires have to be exchanged, then exchange of missile and artillery fires. But it won't come to an all-out war. Because the Chinese, the PLA perceives that victory is not guaranteed to it.
But these pinpricks, what do they mean for our infrastructure push along the line of actual control? And the fact that, Colonel Dini, both you and General Hasnain have served extensively in Ladakh. The perception is that Chinese succeeded in creating a buffer zone. They've ensured that there are no clashes, and yet Indian Army does not move forward. Is the attempt the same even in Arunachal Pradesh? Force a buffer zone in Arunachal Pradesh?
First of all, Gaurav, we must understand that this buffer zone concept, nowhere, no Indian Army officer, and especially the higher commanders who are there, they will not, cede an inch in a territory wherein we do not have a kind of control is gone with us. Let's take the example of North Bank, which between finger 4 and finger 8. Now, we used to go up till finger 8, and you all know that the Chinese used to come to finger 4. But we used to go by foot. When we used to walk down, and they used to come to vehicle. Now, if you are not able to go up till finger 8, and if they are not coming up to finger 4, what is it? Is it a disadvantage for us? We are not giving any territory to them on a platter. So even the concept of this buffer zone, I am very sure that when those negotiations are taking place, those are taking place with the utmost our own interest kept in mind. Nowhere is it like what comes in some of the analysis that we concede about 10 kilometers and then suddenly the Chinese go. It doesn't happen like that. So I can be rest assured that Gaurav, that those kind of buffer zones will not come. Buffer zones will come only where in that area where a clash is to be avoided, wherein both the sides have equal advantages and equal disadvantages.
Okay. In Arunachal Pradesh, General, in your view, and there are reports that seem to indicate that there have been multiple face-offs in Arunachal Pradesh and in Sikkim, where there is a massive infrastructure push on the Chinese side and an infrastructure push on the Indian side. Where do you see the next such skirmish happen, sir? Arunachal, Sikkim, Barahoti, or Ladakh, or somewhere in the Indian Ocean?
See, Gaurav, in any form of war fighting, surprise is one of the principal factors. It's the principle of war, for that matter. So, across the board, all 5 places which you have mentioned, the feasibility exists. It's a question of where some kind of a major advantage accrues to them. Ladakh now is beaten to the edges completely. So I don't think Ladakh is the place where this kind of a focus can come about. Barahoti, yes, infrastructure problems on both sides. A fair amount of, I mean, this is an area which has been generally devoid of tension. Maybe perhaps to enhance the temperatures here, something could happen in that area. Sikkim, we've already had Doklam. We've already gone through a 72-day face-off. Arunachal, we've had many such instances in the past. This current one will add to it. So central sector is a sector which I do feel bears greater importance today. And if I was in command places, central sector would be the place that I would focus on.
Okay, are these diversionary tactics given the pressure that President Xi Jinping is facing internally, Colonel Dini, in your view?
Well, we can't rule out that, Gaurav. We have seen that, at the start of COVID, many people, came out that the entire Galwan and everything was in many ways to divert the kind of focus which China was getting, the negative publicity which it was getting during the initial days of COVID. So yes, there is a point, case in point wherein Xi Jinping is under tremendous pressure internally because of the way he's handled COVID. So it could well be another way of diverting attention, another way to bring out the nationalism, the hyper nationalism into China once again. It could be well that India is looking at the G20 presidency and the kind of importance and the stature which India is growing. So all these things which we can't rule out, but definitely in the coming days, I think as and when we'll come to know more and more about this particular incident, I think clarity will be there.
Okay, General, before I bring in Abhishek, in your view, India getting the G20 presidency, India's stature rising globally, is China trying to keep India down, whether it's at the LAC or through Pakistan, and is China succeeding or not succeeding in your view?
Well,
Gaurav,
definitely
inevitable.
Keeping the pot boiling. I mean, that's something very clear which we've seen.
Okay, sorry, General, you first and then Abhishek.
Sorry.
Go on, General.
Gaurav, it was inevitable. You see, after the 20th Congress, we have found a general peace and quiet in terms of political terms as far as China is concerned. Not too much has been emanating from there. I take you back to 2020, April, May 2020. I still continue to believe that whatever happened in those 2 months, whatever happened in Ladakh was with the specific purpose of putting down India. Wolf water diplomacy in an experimental form against a large country such as India. China did not succeed. Mirror image, 60,000 troops were deployed by India too, and the face-off continues. No strategic advantage accrued to China at all. But once again this time, this effort is being made because India's stature has risen beyond 2020. If you see in the last few days, Prime Minister Modi's statement to Mr. Putin during the SCO summit, this has been quoted everywhere in the world today. This is not the season for war. The stature which India is gaining, G20, the manner in which G20 has taken off after Indonesia has handed it over to India. This is not something that Chinese are happy to live with.
Okay.
And I still continue
Last
to believe
30 seconds, Abhishek Bhalla, these are images that are coming in from base hospital Guwahati. This is where some of the injured soldiers have now been taken. What more do we know, Abhishek?
That's right, Gaurav. All the injured soldiers are in base hospital Guwahati. What I got to know a little while earlier was that all of them are fine now. They're doing well. They've been responding well. Whatever injuries they had, they have been catered to. Remember, it's been 3 days since this standoff and this clash took place. So they are in decent shape, and hopefully they'll be back soon in action. And
no critical injuries. No critical injuries on the Indian side, but there are reports of some critical injuries from on the Chinese side, we are told, and some Chinese soldiers were subsequently sent back, is what we are being told. India Today's Afrida Hussain is at the base hospital Guwahati with this report.
Indian and Chinese troops clashed along the line of control in the Tawang Sector in Arunachal Pradesh on December 9, where 6 Indian armies were injured. 6 Indian Army soldiers were then airlifted on the 9th afternoon to this base hospital situated in Guwahati, which is 151 base hospital of Vashishta. According to the sources, soldiers are doing absolutely fine now and they are in good health condition. This is Afrida Hussain reporting for India Today from Guwahati.
We will continue to track developments on the story very closely. General Hussain, Colonel Dini and Abhishek, as always, many thanks for joining me.